for Azeroth!
Heyo folks, Dutch here, and welcome to the next Rogue Specialization overview. Today I will be discussing the Outlaw Specialization, which used to be Combat, but has been revamped into the Outlaw. Now I will quickly go over the abilities, as well as its talents, and some of the changes they have made with this particular specialization. As in, you should not take this as any sort of full optimal rotation guide, nor anything of proper damage increase. This is just basically meant as me discussing what they have changed. Now, the Combat Rogue, well basically, the Outlaw Rogue is the sort of replacement slash reinvention of the Combat Rogue, which most of us were familiar with already. These guys were usually always meant for consistent damage with their abilities, and they have remained that mostly, but with a few changes. Now, this was of course done due to the description they always had, because the description they always gave it before Legion was that it was considered a swashbuckler. You were kind of like a, you know, pirate kind of figure, but it really never really showed that off in its playing style. What it basically was that you were basically just much more of a sword-wielding type of leather-wearing warrior style. It was much more just about direct combat, though that's not bad to have within a rogue style. It doesn't make sense, and they've really now changed it to give it much more of this sort of cheap trick styled combatant. So most of its basic abilities are pretty straightforward. I will go through each and every one of them and explain their basic attitude. Some of the ones are across all specializations going to be left out, like such as feint and kick, and the same thing applies towards the talents. So without further ado, let's get to it. Now, your opening ability is Saber Slash, which is a vicious slash causing physical damage, and it has a 35% chance to make to strike an additional time and allow you to use one of your other main abilities to be free of charge, which is Pistol Shot, which is also a combo point awarding ability. Basically what this does, you whip a pistol out and you shoot it. So this is kind of the idea what they give you with the whole swashbuckler ability. So let's see if we can proc that little effect. As you can see, there we go. And as you can see, you draw the pistol, which they have made a very nice animation from. I remember from the start that it wasn't that unique, and it looks very similar. And they've definitely improved on its design. It definitely looks, as you can see, the attacks make sense. It's a Saber Slash while I'm using a mace, but that's just the case of it. But still, I think the animation is a pretty good one, and it makes sense. And particularly with the pistol shot, it makes it even more interesting. It also has a slowing effect to itself, but that's less effective during, well, you know, the basic premise of it. Alright, so you have two combo point spenders as standard for the Outlaw Rogue, which is two of them, one of them is direct damage, while the other is much more of a steroid. So run through is the basic premise of it, which is that it's basically it's the new idea of Eviscerate, and as you can see, it works pretty similar to already existing styles. So they decided to actually give it a different one, which is an interesting little trick that they've decided to add to it, which is called Roll the Bones. Now this works in a similar way to what used to be Slice and Dice, but instead of just being the increase in attack speed, it actually increases a random secondary stat. So I activate this, I roll the dice, and then currently I gain increased energy regeneration, which is actually a pretty sweet effect because that allows me. Now if I activate it again, it increases energy regeneration again. I don't know if it always will be that case, but at the moment it does. So let's see if we can get something different. Shark Infested Waters and Broadside. So basically I gain just different kind of strains to the secondary stats, which are pretty nice. I gotta admit, there are some pretty interesting ones in this. And as you can see, it is random depending on the dice roll. That's a neat little thing. Also, with Outlaw Rogues, in comparison to the Assassination Rogues, you do not have poisons. So don't be, if you're thinking you got that. You also have a third one, which is much more meant for these PvP style slash, of course, for some crowd control, or better said, catch-up effect, which is between the eyes, which is basically you use your pistol to shoot the enemy at a particular target, which is also a crowd control. Basically, this is their replacement of kidney shot with some more, well, effective use. So That's pretty much the promise of that, because as far as I overlook the abilities, there is no kidney shot for Outlaw Rogues. It makes sense considering that these guys are much more of a straight up fighter. They do have their other version of Blind, which is Gouge, which is of course anyone who's played Rogues before is familiar with. So that still works the same. Gouge of course used to be just basically, I just activated one of the abilities I wanted to show off. Now this is still similar as it always was. Gouge causes your enemy to become incapacitated, allowing you to do some, of course, of course get yourself out of combat and do whatever you need to. You can attack again, of course this will break the Gouge effect. So that's pretty much it. Kick is still pretty similar as it always was, which is a spell interrupt. You got your sprint, you got some of the abilities are very straightforward. What they do have is a very interesting idea on, of course, a new form of crowd control outside of SAP, which is bribe. Now, I'm pretty sure this isn't going to work, of course, in raids, because this would be insane. But this allows you to bribe a enemy NPC and it'll fight with you for 5 minutes. It's a pretty sweet ability if you know how to use it. I can't really show it off on the target them, but it's pretty sweet. They also have, of course, like most other classes of this type and specialization of this type, a powerful increase on their personal cooldown buffs, which is Adrenaline Rush, which increases your energy regeneration rate by 100% and your attack speed by 20%. Basically, you just turn into something of a hyperactive sword slasher. Now, of course, the last one, and this is mostly for situations when required, is Blade Flurry, which causes your attacks to become slightly cleaving. Of course, it is reduced damage, and you actually have less energy regeneration, but if you get a proper roll of the bones on this is probably going to cancel itself out. I already showed it off, so let's do it again. I can't really show it off because the target numbers are too far ahead, but I think it's pretty clear what the gist of this little trick is. So let's just get this up, and I roll the bones, and as you can see, I get true bearings. And I'm pretty sure it's pretty clear what it does, and I don't forget to use any information. I rolled again, and that's pretty much it. So it's a pretty straightforward effect. So Blade Flurry just basically allows you to cleave. It's very simple. Of course, it does reduce damage as a price of it, but during AoE effect, that's usually the better choice to be made. Considering it's only on a 10-second cooldown, usually by the time you get back to a raid the primary target at a raid encounter, that usually stays like that. All the other abilities are pretty much the same. You got a different version to evasion. Instead of just dodging, you actually riposte everything, which causes you, whatever you parry, you actually do damage back. Now I've gone over the basic abilities, so let's go look at the talents. Some of them are the same, but some are different. So let's start very simple. We've got the first one, which is Ghostly Strike. Strikes an enemy with your cursed weapon, dealing physical damage, and causing the target to take 10% increased damage from your abilities. So this is basically a direct damage ability as well as applying a debuff. Not bad. These of course are all unlocked at the level 15. So that's pretty much that. So let's check out Ghostly Strike and see how it looks. If it has a unique effect. It seems to use the Eviscerate effect. It doesn't seem, but of course it applies the. It says it applies. As you can see, it applies the Ghostly Strike, which causes your target to take increased damage. It's a pretty straightforward one. I don't think it needs much more explanation outside of that. So that's pretty much the state on that. The other two can actually be just talked about because it doesn't really show much, except of course, well, it's just based on the other one, which is Swordmaster. Saber Slash has a 10% increased chance to strike an additional time, allowing you, of course, to quickly throw out your pistol shot. And then there's Quick Draw, which is free use of pistol shot, granted by Saber Slash, now generate 1 additional combo point and deal 50% increased damage. So this really just amps up pistol shot pretty sweet, which is not bad. So it depends on what you like. Do you want something with some damage as well as a debuff, or do you just want an increase on your free pistol shots, or do you want to just increase combo point? I would go for this myself, but it's all up to you what you like to pick. I don't really have to show these off because they're pretty self-explanatory and they work with their existing abilities. Next up we have in the level 30 we got Grappling Hook, Acrobatic Strikes, and Hit and Run. I'll go for the two passives first and then we'll get the Grappling Hook, which is Acrobatic Strikes increases the range of on all your melee attacks by 3 yards. So if you go into combat, let's see how close I need to get. So that's about the range I need to get while in combat, like that. Let's get out of combat for a second. I am in a rested area, so there we go. And now I should have some more range. As you can see, that range is pretty significant. It's pretty impressive how we can do that, but I guess it makes sense in a certain way. And I'd say it's sweet, but I don't really see the use because you're probably going to be close to the hitbox of the enemy anyway with this. So it's useful, but not required. Hit and run is just a very simple idea. It just increases your movement speed in general. So this already is, it's not bad, but I can see its use maybe in PvP and maybe in some encounters in raid bosses that might require some a lot of movement from melee DPS, but outside of that I really just don't see much use in it. So, yeah, I guess if you just want a passive speed boost, this is pretty sweet. But the last one, and I've got to say the most interesting one, is Grappling Hook, which is a interesting little idea on the whole. New forms of, as we all know, we're all familiar, of course, with the warriors now becoming very iconic heroic leap. Now, of course, they can't just get that to a rogue because it's just going to be ripping it off. So, in order to make it a little bit more believable, they decided to turn it into a grappling hook. So you just throw this at the target location and you just jump there. This can be actually pretty sweet, although because of its targeting effect, it works pretty much, except without, you know, damage or anything of that sort. But I can see its usage anyway. So that's pretty much straightforward. It's all about just the range increase, either getting close to you, having some extra range in attacks, movement speed, or just a quick, you know, gap closer. It's basically whatever you wish to be. Also, in the stealth mechanics, it's basically still the same. Instead of having, of course, the typical stuff, instead of, for example, Garrote, you have ambush, and you still have cheap shot. That's basically the stealth part of it. Got that out of the way real quick. Really don't need to get any more clear about that. Next up, we have the 45 talents have pretty much remained the same. Anticipation, deeper stratagem, and vigor are all the same, so we can pretty much skip that. Let's move on to the next section, which is the level 60 talents, which include Iron Stomach, Elusiveness, and Cheat Death. Elusiveness and Cheat Death have both been explained. Don't need any further explanation. Iron Stomach basically just increases the effects of any form of healing effects from certain items. This includes healing potions, health stones, and your own Crimson Vial. So this is actually pretty sweet, causing that this is actually healing you even for more than it already did. So this is actually not a bad thing to have. If you're just looking for something different, you can go with Elusiveness, Cheat Death, whatever, you know, whatever floats your boat. Next up we have, which is strange considering I remember I don't have blind. Oh, I do. Excuse me, I apparently do have blind. I thought I didn't, but well, besides that, alright, blind. Now is, with these level 75, we have 2 that remain the same and 1 that is different. Let's start with these, which is Prey on the Weak. Enemies disabled with your blind, gouge, and cheap shot or sap take 10% increased damage, and Dirty Tricks does that. Pretty simple all. But then we have Parlay. Pacifies the target not in combat who is forced to negotiate instead of fighting for 5 minutes. Only works on humanoids, demons, and dragonkin. Damage cost will break to piece. This is an interesting little thing. So it basically turns your blind from its typical, you know, combat CC into a sort of, you know, long range CC ability. It's not bad. I mean, it allows you to use a CC ability that doesn't require self and doesn't require you to be up in their ass. So it's a good little if you want some long range CC. Prey on the Weak is still the same, as well as Dirty Tricks. So that's pretty much that. It again depends on what your taste is. I guess, you know, Prey on the Weak has its use in some cases. I wouldn't really know. I don't really use it myself, but I guess it has. And then you have Dirty Tricks. It really depends on your taste. So just pick and choose. That's basically the case here. Next up we have in the level 90 we have Cannonball Garage, Alacrity, and Killing Spree. Alacrity I've already discussed with the Assassination Rogue, which is just basically a stacking buff. And next up on the list we have Cannonball Barrage and Killing Spree, which are both on a pretty fairly cooldown. So after this I will of course show off the other others in the list, which of course also change depending on your specialization with one of them. So I'm just going to show off one of them, which let's start off with Cannonball Garage. Now this is pretty much giving you even more of that feeling of a pirate. Basically what allows you, as it says, commands a ghost ship crew to barrage the target area with cannonballs, doing physical damage and slowing enemies within that area for 50 seconds for 1.5 seconds. To be honest, it's a pretty small explosion area considering it's called Cannonball Barrage. You expect that you're going to get a massive amount of cannonballs barraging down on your enemies, but it's a pretty... I guess these guys are just pretty good marksmen with their cannons, which is weird considering they're cannons, but let's just go with it. So let's try out this little trick. As you can see, it's an AoE. I'll keep it on this one to keep the aggro effect from that guy away, because that just makes the next talent system a little bit different. So, or different, well, it just takes up time. So let's just drop in some cannons then. And as you can see, that's very short. It's very short. It's really just for 1.8 seconds. If I gotta be honest, it's not bad if you just need something of a good ranged AoE effect for a short moment, but is it worth the 1 minute cooldown? I mean, it's on a 1 minute cooldown. 30 seconds would have been a little bit more acceptable. I mean, it doesn't do that much damage, so I wouldn't really recommend it myself. Of course, this is all based on what I believe is the best setup. You don't have to agree with anything I come up in this entire build, because it's my taste. You really don't have to agree with it. So next up on the list we have, of course, two of them remain, which is Marked for Death and Death from Above. Of course, now Death from Above has been replaced with Run Through rather than in Venom, and Marked for Death is still pretty much the same, but the last one is Slice and Dice, which actually replaces Roll the Bones, which basically turns it, of course, into the Slice and Dice we've always known, which is, of course, basically you replete your random statistic with a 90% increase on your attacks, melee attack speed. Not bad, but I'm not so sure if this really has that much use in combat myself. I mean, you might be saying the other ones have a random effect to it, but considering what those two, it's really not such a bad choice to have, considering. So you really should keep that in mind. So I myself would go for Death from Above, but again, it depends on your particular choice of abilities. So, as I said before, the Death from Above is pretty similar, but just for the sake of it, I will, of course, once again show it off. You use it, you jump into the air, and you drop down on the guy, and then you get back to the typical rotation until it comes off cooldown. And that's pretty much actually it. We still have one little ability to discuss back in the level 90 specialization, 90 level talents. Correct me if I'm wrong. Look, I'm confused. Sometimes I just get all these things in my head, and let's just say I just can't keep straight on it. So, Killing Spree returns, but once again it has become a talent now rather than a, standard ability that was in the Combat Rogue set, because of Blade Flurry is now more, on and off switching. Of course, it's not instant, but still, it's pretty sweet. And Killing Spree still works the same as it always does. What it does is that it teleports you to the enemy to an enemy within 10 yards, attacking 7 times over 3 seconds for about a certain amount of physical damage from main hand and offhand, while and now with an added bonus, if you activate Blade Flurry, you start popping all over the place to enemies. So I won't be showing the AoE effect off because there's only 2 targets and I really don't think it's that important. But just for the fun of it, let's show this baby off. And as you can see, it's a pretty simple idea. So it's basically just a bit of a high damage spike. I'm not sure if the 2-minute cooldown is worth it. Alacrity could still be your taste. But if you consider in AoE situations and you wanted something a little bit more, effective with the Blade Flurry, this actually can work pretty well. Particularly, it might keep you teleporting around, which may cause you to stay away from certain threats. It really depends still, as I have said countless times before, on your taste. This is all, of course, not... like I said before, this isn't about me creating the optimal build. This is about me just showing off the abilities and my overall opinion about it if I feel like saying it. Overall though, I have to admit that the Outlaw Rogue makes much more sense than the old Combat Rogue, because that thing was just weird, and it was known actually to some that if it was the easiest specialization to learn of the rogues, but it was also known to be one of the more, you know, weaker ones when it came to damage output in the end game content with raids. I'm pretty sure some people will, of course, object on that matter, but that's what I've heard from certain sources, particularly from within the guild that I usually roll out with. So that's pretty much the case with it. Now the Combat Rogue, I don't know when it comes to its damage output. I am not a number cruncher. If you want to do that, you can go play the specialization yourself if you're interested in these specializations. But outside of that, they feel pretty much the same as they always do. It's basically, like I said, it's the same thing. They're just now, they are upfront fighters, but they now actually have some more of their own taste, particularly with the pistol shot, making it much more feeling like a swashbuckler, with the idea that you have something of a pistol that you use in combat. So I have to say that that pretty much makes them much more unique in their own style, and definitely, like I said, it just gives them much more of the feeling. They've definitely now turned it into much more of a swashbuckling idea, particularly with the dice roll idea. I like this little idea. Some people might say that it's ridiculous and it makes no sense, but I actually think that it actually does, because, I mean, come on, who wouldn't want to be this kind of swashbuckler idea? I mean, pirates have always been a popular thing among us geeks, and this one only works better with the idea. Combined, of course, with the idea of being an assassin, or you just know this kind of roguish type, and this works actually rather well. So I have to say, I'm not against this entire specialization. It makes sense. Some of the alterations on some of their abilities make sense as well. I mean, the talents, some of them really just make sense. A grappling hook, I like that idea. Like, that gives you really this idea of a pirate. The ability, of course, for you to grapple onto a location. It's of course a location, not an enemy. If they turned it into a targeted thing, they basically would turn this into the survival hunter idea, because they have a similar ability with a harpoon. So overall, I think this sort of, you know, specialization makes kind of sense with them now for a rogue style character. I mean, they're not a ranger, they're not an assassin. They really make much more sense. And I overall actually have to say that this could be much more of an interesting specialization to play around with now. I might actually play a little bit more with this. I can't really say, but I have to admit I might try this out. Oh, anyway guys, I hope you guys have enjoyed this overview of the Outlaw Rogue. If you want to see more of these videos, please check out my channel and subscribe to it if you enjoy any of these videos. If you enjoyed this particular video, please leave a like. And if you did enjoy the video, please share it with others if they think that if they play WoW and they want to know a little bit more, but not from a real ridiculous number crunching idea, just for the more casual WoW player. Hope you guys have enjoyed the video, and my name has been Dutch, and I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.